One of my very favorite Calvin and Hobbes strips is just a simple black and white 4-panel strip. In the first panel, Calvin is in the living room, and he's got this hammer in his hand, and he is indiscriminately just banging a bunch of nails into his family's coffee table. He is annihilating it, for no apparent reason. And his mom hears all the racket, and she runs into the room screaming, "Calvin, what are you doing to the coffee table?" Calvin pauses for just a minute, and he looks down at all the crooked nails he's hammered into the table, and then he looks up at his mom and he asks, "Is this some sort of trick question or what?" This is a story about our love affair with pointlessness. Joe Sprins appears to be in love with pointlessness. In the only photo of Joe we have on file during his brief major league career, he's honking away on a saxophone while standing in a swimming pool. No reason given, no reason asked. I don't think he even knows how to play the sax. This is a beautiful portrait of a man delighting in pure nonsense. Nothing is being accomplished here. Nothing is learned. Nothing is progressed. None of that matters. Joe Sprins, a 37-year-old minor league catcher, is no stranger to this lack of progression. Today is August 3rd, 1939, and Joe is occupying a baseball diamond. I don't believe it's this exact baseball diamond, but it's at least very close to the original site. He is 16 seasons into what will ultimately be a 23-season career as a professional baseball player. By the end of it, he'll appear in 2,224 games. 2,223 of those are minor league games. Just 21 of them are major league games. He'll never really break through because while he's a great teammate and excellent catcher defensively, he just can't hit that well. Joe, therefore, is a minor league lifer. Is this a pointless career? Well, not to us, and surely not to him, right? He made a living playing baseball. That's the dream. But if you were to ask our ancestors about this arrangement, they might be more than a little bit annoyed. We have spent somewhere around 200,000 years as anatomically modern human beings. We've spent the last couple hundred of those years in the era of industrialization and the last 12,000 or so in an age of agriculture that actually has allowed us to sit and stay put and think of weird, stupid stuff to do. But across the preceding 90% of this cosmic journey, we've had little to no energy we could afford to waste on screwing around for its own sake. For almost every single one of us, every meaningful venture was in direct service of our continued survival. Imagine trying to explain the life of Joe Sprins to our forebears. He isn't hunting, gathering, cooking, making clothes, or building shelter. He isn't even conducting any kind of religious ritual that might curry the gods' favor. Instead, he catches a little ball and he runs around on a square. He does this all day. The rest of us give him all the food, clothing, and shelter he needs in exchange for him doing this all day. What would our distant ancestors make of that? Their constraints were unforgiving and absolute. They spent almost all of these 200,000 years staring at the seas that bury our land and split our world apart, unable to alter them, staring up at the sky, categorically unable to reach it, roaming the land but too preoccupied with migrating across it, foraging from it, and laboring over it to really enjoy it. Joe, standing just barely on the far side of this line, finds himself in a brand new world in which we can suddenly do all these things thanks to the wealth of technological advances at our disposal. We can, and do, occupy the sky, reshape the waters, and enjoy the land, and as we'll see today, these ventures often take the most pointless forms imaginable. On this day in 1939, Joe has a very unimportant job to do. His job is to catch a baseball. A couple thousand people are spectating from the bleachers, but he is standing on this field all by himself. He pounds his mitt as his eyes track baseball number 1. This baseball is streaking through the air at approximately 145 miles per hour if mathematicians from the University of California are to be believed. That would be about 40 miles per hour faster than any human being has ever thrown one, and about 20 miles per hour faster than any batted ball on record. Needless to say, this ball was neither hit nor thrown. It soon becomes clear to Joe that it's well out of reach, and he is not going to be able to snag it. Maybe that's a good thing. The ball obliterates itself into the bleachers. Fortunately, this part of the stands is empty. Jesus, a teammate offers unhelpfully. These players have hit, thrown, and caught uncountable thousands of baseballs throughout their lives and have never, ever seen a baseball fly like that. More are coming. and Joe is terrified. Suddenly, it makes a lot of sense that he's out there all by himself. This brand new, increasingly pointless world might just take a little bit of getting used to. This episode of Pretty Good is brought to you by T-Mobile, the best 5G coverage in the game, home and away on America's largest 5G network. Learn more at T-Mobile.com/MLB. This ball field is on Treasure Island, situated in the San Francisco Bay and within the city limits of San Francisco. A lot of islands around here are pretty new, as far as islands go. As the Ice Age ended, sheets melted and water flooded this valley to create this bay. That would make nearby Yerba Buena Island, as well as Alcatraz Island to the west, somewhere in the very general ballpark of 10,000 years old. Treasure Island is about 2 years old. It is an artificial island. Its nice and neat angles kind of give that away. At the time of its completion, it was believed to be far and away the largest artificial island ever built. Humans all over the world have been building their own islands since ancient times, most abundantly in Scotland, where people spent the last 5,000 years or so constructing little islands called crannigs. Why? To seclude themselves from danger? As a status symbol? Those who have studied them can really only guess because no obvious explanation presents itself. We do not know why they built these. And I'd guess that 5,000 years from now, people won't be able to explain Treasure Island either. The stated motivation is this. Just recently, the construction of 2 landmark bridges was completed. The Bay Bridge, which connects San Francisco to Oakland, and the Golden Gate Bridge, which offers access to Marin County. Here are 2 examples of endeavors that are genuinely astonishing, are enormously useful, and do have a point. The Bay Bridge in particular had been daydreamed about for well over 50 years before construction began. They finally made it happen by using Yerba Buena Island as a sort of stepping stone, and after 3 years of effort, they'd finished one of the largest suspension bridges on Earth. San Francisco is now linked up to the Transcontinental Railroad, helping to ensure its future as a major economic hub. The Golden Gate Bridge, while not nearly as long, is probably an even more impressive feat of engineering. Even in our time, this would be bridge building in impossible mode. Not only are you building this thing in the middle of an earthquake epicenter while in the wake of the Great Depression, there's treacherous geography, heavy fog, and a total lack of protection from a Pacific Ocean that is constantly slamming it with winds and ocean currents. It was called the Impossible Bridge, and the bridge that can't be built. Once it actually was built, the city celebrated by planning a World's Fair, but the question of where to hold this fair was not an easy one. The San Francisco Peninsula had been so fully built out that there wasn't a lot of open space. Now, from the benefit of a 10,000-foot view, unencumbered by petty concerns like city limits, I would suggest that, hey, you know all that land you now have access to because of those multiple incredible bridges, which are the primary reasons you are throwing this World's Fair? How about you just use some of that land? But why do that when you can just dredge up 20 million cubic yards of sand from the bottom of the bay and make new land? They plopped all this sand on top of some shallow shoals just to the north of Yerba Buena Island, reinforced it with a rock wall, laid a bunch of topsoil over it, and called it Treasure Island. What were those bridges for again? Access to land, right? And you just made more land? You have eaten your dessert without finishing your dinner. Go to your room. Of course, it's not quite as simple as that. President Roosevelt lent his support to the Treasure Island project because he saw potential military applications there, and as wartime loomed, it was quickly repurposed as a naval base. After the war, the Navy used it as a training station for scrubbing ships of radioactive materials. This meant bringing in ships that had been directly exposed to the nuclear blast of Bikini Atoll and were buzzing with radioactivity. They even built a fake ship, the USS Pandemonium, that they used as the setting for a fun little scavenger hunt, sprinkling around chunks of radioactive isotopes like they were coins in Super Mario 1-1. Once personnel were finished with those radioactive items, they opted for one of humankind's first ever ideas, digging a hole and dumping stuff you don't want to deal with anymore in the hole. The Navy seemed to delight in reducing their fancy brand new island to a complete dump. In October of 1957, they built a mock nuclear weapon which they detonated in the air 600 feet above Treasure Island, mushroom cloud and all. This munition contained white phosphorus and 300 gallons of napalm. This was not part of any kind of training exercise, they just did it for fun. Treasure Island's naval base was shut down in the 90s. Since then, cleanup efforts have been made, but a lot of San Franciscans are still really concerned by the idea of radioactive elements sitting within an artificial island with a very low elevation that faces not only the perpetual threat of earthquakes, but rising sea levels. Lately, these concerns have been waved off as, quote, hysteria. That's a pretty unconvincing dismissal. When low-income families began moving in around the turn of the millennium, the Navy warned them not to dig anywhere or plant anything. A lot of hazardous materials have evaded sweeps, most recently this huge chunk of radioactive dirt that was found in 2019. And during a 2007 excavation, they found a single little scrap of foil on Treasure Island that was still so radioactive that simply standing next to it for 10 minutes would give you a dose equivalent to a chest x-ray. Let's just suppose, for the sake of argument, that by 2024, cleanup really has progressed to the point at which Treasure Island no longer poses a health risk. Given all the radioactive elements found not all that long ago, I still don't think you're allowed to dismiss worries as hysteria. By the way, who said that? Can we get a source on that? Oh, okay. It's the developer who is currently building 8,000 housing units on Treasure Island. At this stage, pointless isn't the word for Treasure Island, but it is certainly a word. California is a place of staggering natural beauty. To those of us who didn't grow up there, parts of it feel as though they're climate-controlled year-round. One time I was in the Santa Monica Mountains, and I watched the marine layer descend over the mountaintops. The video I took didn't even come close to truly capturing the beauty of that moment. It's one of the most incredible things I have ever seen. California is a place full of scenes and moments like that one. And arguably, the worst little speck of it by far is the only little speck of it that we built and immediately went out of our way to ruin. But back to August 3rd, 1939. Our friend Joe Sprins here doesn't know about any of this stuff. He has no idea what will ultimately become of this weird fake island he is standing on right now. He's just a guy trying to catch a baseball of terrifying and unprecedented speed. Baseball number 1 was scary enough, hitting the bleachers with such a loud crash that it frightened everybody in attendance. Here comes baseball number 2, traveling every bit as fast at an estimated 145 miles per hour. This one, Joe does have a shot at hauling in. He tracks it, puts out his glove, and just misses it, perhaps by a couple of feet. The ball hits the ground, but Joe has been catching in professional baseball for 16 years. He has heard the sound of every carom, every bad hop, every pitch in the dirt, every foul against the backstop, more times than he can count. But this sounds unlike any bounce he has ever heard because it is not a bounce at all. He looks down. The baseball has created a small crater and has buried itself in the ground. A baseball like that has no business being caught by a human being. Some small part of Joe Sprins says, "Forget this entire thing. Get out of here. Now." But then he tells himself, God hates a coward. 1,200 feet above Treasure Island sits Goodyear's Volunteer blimp and a guy with a bag full of baseballs. At about 130 feet in length, the Volunteer is not nearly as big as airships are capable of being, but it remains uniquely imposing. It's more alien than any other type of aircraft we have ever come up with. An airplane is moving. It clearly has somewhere to be. A helicopter can remain stationary for a time, but it makes all kinds of racket just laboring to keep itself up there. But a blimp effortlessly and silently can stay in place for a long, long time. It's almost unsettling. What exactly is it up to? What could its purpose possibly be? Well, here's the good news. By and large, it doesn't even know. Throughout the entire history of the dirigible, a ceaseless debate has raged over whether it's actually good for anything at all. The short answer, yes, at certain points in history for extremely specific applications, if the weather is really nice and if you don't fill it with gas that can catch on fire. Germany flew tons of these things over Great Britain during World War I as strategic bombers. Thankfully, they were horrendously inaccurate bombers to the point of uselessness. All the same, their gigantic frames struck terror into the hearts of British civilians, and they were surprisingly resilient. Even if they were shot up with holes, they'd lose gas at such a slow rate that it usually wasn't an immediate concern. This ended real quick once Great Britain implemented stronger anti-aircraft defenses and incendiary ammunition rounds, which are really bad news if you're flying a big, slow, extremely combustible bag of hydrogen. The British immediately started waxing Zeppelins left and right, and airships were almost exclusively thought of as support aircraft from then on. America happened to be sitting on large reserves of helium, a non-flammable alternative to hydrogen, and airships helped save countless lives when they turned out to be extremely useful for spotting U-boats during World War II. And then began two struggles that have lasted the better part of a century. First, the pedantic arguments over the differences between non-rigid blimps and rigid airships. I'm just gonna use shorthand and call them all blimps because who cares? The second, more daunting struggle has been the question of what exactly to do with these things. The blimp is an aircraft that doesn't need a lot of fuel. It can remain stationary and stay up there for a long time. It's gotta be good for something, right? Surveillance? Well, radar stations and satellites have almost every application covered there. Cargo? It's been proposed that it could deliver relatively light essentials like medicine to remote areas, but the use cases are very specific and limited. Well, what about travel and tourism? No. Those of us who love the blimp sometimes try to tout it as an eco-friendly alternative, which doesn't really pass muster since helium is a super exhaustible resource we harvest through ecologically destructive means. They're clearly not a large-scale solution for anything. So what's left? Aerial shots of sporting events that you see for 5 seconds when they come back from commercial, and advertising. The Goodyear blimp advertises Goodyear, which, since Goodyear was the original manufacturer of the Goodyear blimp, is kind of like saying a Ford truck is sponsored by Ford. MetLife was a longtime blimp advertiser, but packed it up in 2016 after deciding that the prohibitively expensive airship just wasn't a smart use of advertising dollars anymore. It seems that you need a special appreciation of pointlessness to bother with blimps at all, as evidenced by the two other major blimp advertisers in the States in recent years. There's DirecTV, which dares to ask the question, what if cable TV required a clear view of the southern sky, stopped working when it rained, and wasn't even available to a lot of apartment dwellers? When I worked at Radio Shack about 20 years ago, we sold DirecTV, and whenever somebody asked about it, I said, listen, don't even bother with it, just get cable. The other one is Subway. You know, you can't quite duplicate the magic of a McDonald's or Taco Bell or Popeyes at home, but I know that you can make a sandwich in your kitchen right now that outdoes every single Subway sandwich at every single one of their comically redundant locations. These are the kinds of companies a blimp appeals to. Companies that revel in pointlessness. They're not alone. We, as a people, as a society, cannot resist a good blimp. Just the sight of one on a sunny Saturday morning suggests that something big is going on somewhere in town. The blimp is the very worst performer at almost every single thing it can do, but no other vehicle on Earth can say, hey, look at me, quite like the blimp can. The blimp is just about the goofiest thing we have to offer. Imagine if 95% of an airplane or truck or anything else had to remain completely empty for it to work. It's a big, slow, clumsy dope that farts around in the sky, self-evidently unwilling and unable to do anything important. And we will make every paper-thin excuse we have to, for as long as we have to keep it up there. That is how much we love it. The blimp is a relic of the past, but maybe it's also a preview of the future. The best kind of future, in which we can feel at liberty to put things in the world, not in service of some objective or conquest or bottom line, but because we think they are neat. Today, in 1939, the volunteer blimp is, for once, perfectly suited for its job today. No other vehicle in existence can stay 1,200 feet in the air, perfectly in place, allowing its pilot to drop baseballs on the field below. Sports are pointless, and since they are, the only conclusion left to draw is that pointlessness is one of the greatest things about being alive. Even as compared to other sports though, baseball presents exceptional varieties of futility. For starters, there's the obvious poetry of standing 1 or 2 feet away from your objective and having to run around a 360-foot square in order to get there. There's also the regular frustration of the loud out. How many times have you seen a hitter put their bat on the ball perfectly, only for it to shoot right at an infielder's glove? That doesn't happen because of some minute miscalculation by the hitter or some devious defensive shift. It's just a round bat, round ball pagan ritual that's far too quick and presents far too many variables for human beings to really harness. Next time up, that very same batter will put a dopey little slap on the ball and it'll go for a hit. If we think of a baseball season as an experiment to determine the best baseball team, this experiment is so rife with these freak outcomes that they need to be smoothed out across a span of an extraordinary number of trials. For the last century, Major League Baseball teams have played upwards of 150 games per season. Today, that number is locked in at 162. They were of course originally motivated by ticket sales, not statistical soundness, but if the objective is simply to establish a strong correlation between being the best team and being the champion, this is the way to do it. 1905 was the first season to feature both a World Series and a standardized 150-plus game schedule. For many decades, there weren't really even playoffs in the sense we're used to. They just slotted the best American League team and the best National League team in the World Series and determined the champion, who you see highlighted in green, from there. The higher they are here, the higher their regular season winning percentage. Between the 1920s and the 1940s, this turned out to be an awful way of determining the best American and/or Canadian baseball team because it categorically excluded teams from the Negro Leagues. I've highlighted all the Negro League teams in magenta whose winning percentages exceeded that of the World Series champion. The talent distribution was pretty top-heavy, but the great teams were really great. There is no telling how many World Series they might have won, whether individually or collectively, had they not been segregated out of contention. That enormous caveat aside, World Series champions from 1905 through the 1960s were quite often the winningest American or National League teams in the regular season. 75% of the time, the champ was either the winningest or second winningest team from those leagues and never once lower than fourth. Meaning that if you fell short of excellence during the regular season, you had no shot at a championship. The outcome of a season as long as 162 games was ultimately decided by a best-of-7 World Series that could last as few as 4 games, but it always felt kind of fair. In this time, from a competitive standpoint, the American and National Leagues were regarded as completely separate institutions that never played each other except for the World Series. One series, guaranteed to last long enough to see a team's entire 4-pitcher rotation to decide which league was superior. If you lost, you never felt cheated. And then Major League Baseball began expanding its playoff format. In 1969, the postseason was expanded to a 4-team bracket, which remained in use until 1993. This meant playing a best-of-7 league championship series, and then, if you survived, the World Series. The story was similar. If you won the World Series, you likely had one of the best seasons, if not the best. This did allow a few outliers to reach up and grab a title, though. There were the 1980 Phillies, 85 Royals, and most interestingly, the 87 Minnesota Twins, who by pure luck grabbed a playoff spot by finishing at the top of an unusually weak AL West division. They only had the 9th best record in baseball in '87, which suggests pretty strongly that the best team of 1987 did not get that trophy. Still, this is not necessarily a bad thing. Fans of non-excellent teams could now look at these Twins and feel like they have a chance. I'd argue that this element of drama and unpredictability is welcome, provided it doesn't happen that often. Between 1995 and 2011, the majors expanded their playoff format further, splitting each league into 3 divisions and adding 1 wildcard spot per league to expand the playoffs to 8 teams. Now every team began the postseason with an additional best-of-5 series. The difference between a best-of-7 and a best-of-5 is enormous. Every baseball team ever, no matter how great, still sustains semi-regular stretches of 3 or 4 games in which the unforgiving winds of baseball don't break their way. It's within this era, as you might guess, that the correlation between best regular season team and World Series champion weakens considerably. Across different seasons, the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th best regular season teams all won titles, but the St. Louis Cardinals are most interesting here. They finished with the best regular season record in both 2004 and 2005 and missed out on a championship both times. But the next year, in 2006, they did win a World Series title despite a mediocre regular season in which they barely won more games than they lost. Meanwhile, our old friends, the 2001 Seattle Mariners, pieced together the greatest 162-game season ever seen. Every bullpen falls apart now and then. Championship bullpens have faltered here, or here, or here. The Mariners' pen instead happened to falter here, and they were bounced before reaching the World Series. 2012 saw the addition of a second wildcard team per league, and in 2022, a third was added. So now we have 12 playoff spots in a 30-team league, meaning nearly half of Major League Baseball gets to go to the playoffs every year. Under the current format, the AL and NL teams with the best records do receive some measure of protection in the form of the first-round bye, but in 2023 it was of no help at all, with both top teams, the Orioles and Braves, being immediately dumped in the next round by wildcard teams. Again, though, this is not necessarily a bad thing. 2023's World Series champion was the Texas Rangers, whose regular season record tied for just 6th best, but whose fans had waited for more than 60 years to see him get their first championship. That is something I hope as many fans as possible get to experience at least once, and here, it was made possible by the expansion of the postseason format. But it comes at the direct expense of this experiment. The point of this 162-game season is to smooth out all the flukes and freak occurrences that the game of baseball manufactures at levels unseen in other sports. But if you're gonna decide it at the very end by tiny samples of 7, 5, even 3-game playoff series, what was it all for? If we were to have some fun and redesign the Major League Baseball season entirely from scratch and wanted to continue to play a ton of games while preserving some level of importance within those games, I have a couple of suggestions. We could reduce the regular season to 140 games and advance the top 12 teams to a second high-stakes 30-game season at the end, and that season's top American and National League teams would then be slotted into a best-of-7 World Series. This way, if the best team of Season 1 didn't make it to the World Series, we could at least say they had a comfortable sample in which to repeat their success. If we really want to go crazy, we could also subdivide a season into, say, 5 smaller seasons of 30 games with the best-of-7 World Series at the end of each one. This would allow more teams and more fan bases a chance at their moment in the sun. It would also imbue some much-needed drama into the occasional dynastic super team that comes around. Could they actually win 3 or 4 of a given year's World Series? Could they even run the table? Lots of possibilities, or at least fun to imagine, but that's all we'll really ever be able to do because Major League Baseball will never actually consider any of them for the long haul. This 162-game season is too fundamental to the game's history and identity. This cake has been baked, leaving us with little choice but to appreciate this for what it is. A staircase of a million steps, the last few of which might be trapdoors. So then, the pride is in doing it as right as you can, for as long and consistently as you can, knowing the journey is engineered to fall apart at the very end, and trying anyway. It's kind of beautiful. It's kind of illustrative of life. It is also one hell of a slog. Our friends at StatHead recently introduced a really interesting metric called Championship Win Probability Added, or CWPA. I'll try to explain it by way of example. In terms of CWPA, the single most important play of the 2023 regular season in all of Major League Baseball was this. On September 28th, near the very end of the season, J.P. Crawford and the Seattle Mariners are down 1 run with 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th. If they win, their playoff hopes survive.
Season pretty much on the line. Slicing drive, Carter back! He can't get it! And the Mariners win the game!
And the crowd does not need to look at CWPA to understand how important this is. Listen to it. They know. This play registered a CWPA of 1.48%. The idea, in other words, is that this one hit single-handedly increased the Mariners' chances of eventually winning the World Series by 1.48%. At Fangraphs, Chris Gilligan laments that CWPA, as compelling as it is, might not catch on with people simply because even the biggest moments, like that one we just saw, register such a low number. Even though there's no logic in it, that moment feels like it should register at least a little bit closer to 100%. 1.5% feels like such an insignificant little speck of progress toward a World Series title. It is a tough thing to reckon with, because if even a moment like that, the most consequential hit of the entire Major League Baseball regular season, produces a figure that small, what does it say about all the others? Boy, do I have some bad news for you. This is gonna be a pie chart. So there's the big play, and the only play of the Seattle Mariners season that stood even as high as 1%. 11 plays registered at least half of 1%, but below 1%. 85 more plays were worth at least 1/4 of 1%. 599 more plays were worth at least 1/10 of 1%. This is it. This is all the plays worth even 0.1%. Below this, we see some plays like leadoff doubles, third outs, etc. that did contribute to the outcome of the game in question, but their contribution toward the ultimate quest for a championship was negligible. By the time you get to 0.03 of 1%, you're talking about plays like, for example, getting hit by a pitch with the bases empty in the 5th inning of a tie game in July. These are plays that perhaps 40,000 people witnessed in person, and that every single one of those people surely forgot within a week's time, including the guy who threw the pitch and the guy who was hit by it. Does it feel like a slog yet? We're only a third of the way through. About half of the Mariners' plays in 2023 contributed a CWPA of either 0.02 of 1% or 0.01 of 1%. In other words, if a World Series championship is the weight of this private Cessna jet, these plays are a 20-ounce bottle of soda in the armrest drink holder. It's virtually nothing, and this pie is rounded out by 2,000 plays of actual nothing. The baseball experience is overwhelmingly and definitionally pointless. It is an expression of pointlessness, a celebration of it, a monument to it, and we love it. We've never stopped loving it. In recent years, we've heard a lot of doomsaying from people who claim that baseball is a sport in decline. While it's true that baseball left center stage in our culture a long time ago, and no World Series will ever command nearly as much attention as a Super Bowl ever again, millions and millions of people love this game. Millions of kids around the world are playing baseball and learning to love it. It is not going anywhere. And in fact, if you were an extraterrestrial studying Earth from a satellite's perspective, baseball would tell you something nothing else can. Suppose you scour the Earth for evidence, any evidence, that we are not a Spartan, joyless society. That there's some fun going on here, some romance, some spirituality, perhaps even, yes, some pointlessness. Most of this place appears to be packed with buildings, although we have no means of seeing what's going on in there. If anyone's having any fun inside, we wouldn't know. Things like statues or spires of places of worship would give us a clue, but we can't really observe those well from a bird's eye view. How about parks? Well, those would seem to provide some kind of utility. There have to be trees, something has to grow oxygen and maintain some kind of ecosystem around here. Same with golf courses, which don't really differentiate themselves enough from parks for us to really tell. Racetracks look like they might be testing grounds for all those cars we see rolling around. Football fields? There's something going on there, but it looks so regimented, like something's being precisely measured out. An archaeological dig maybe, whatever's going on there, it doesn't look fun. This, though, what is this? There are no trees, no crops, no cows standing around feeding on the grass. There is a neatly kept arrangement of dirt in this odd landscaping that doesn't appear to be in service of anything. It fans out into this big empty field, and there are a lot of these. And they're all laid out in different dimensions. Some of them are exquisitely maintained, yet nowhere near symmetrical, suggesting a complete disregard for perfection. A lot of them have boundaries that crudely snap to fit the street grid. What they're for is completely unclear, but some appear so worn down that they've clearly been used for something. These things claim large amounts of space, There are 84 of them within the city limits of San Francisco, which is almost exclusively confined to the tip of this peninsula. Land is in higher demand here than in almost any other place on the planet. It's as though every square foot is claimed by someone for some purpose. They're so desperate for land that once in a while they go off and make more land. But combined, these fields take up 123 acres of San Francisco real estate. The average land value here is $3.2 million per acre, meaning that these fields take up $394 million worth of land. Developers would snatch up every last speck of this land the exact microsecond it became available, but we will not let them. Supposing you were this extraterrestrial who had never heard of baseball, you would make the conclusion that there is something special going on here. Eccentricity, or sentimentality, or appreciation of the abstract, or perhaps even real joy. The imprints left by baseball, as well as its beloved cousin softball, are among the only such evidence of these qualities of ours that can be observed from space. While you're flying over America, at least, you're not likely to spot anything more intrinsically human. Baseball is the pursuit to which Joe Sprins has dedicated his life. As of today, August 3rd, 1939, he's entering his late 30s. He hasn't appeared in the majors for 6 years. Any ambitions he might have had of being a regular major leaguer were done away with a long, long time ago. He just loves baseball, and more specifically, he loves the connections that baseball allows him to form with other people. Joe has had a very outsized amount written about him for a guy who barely ever made it past AA ball. Baseball writers just love the guy, just like everybody else loves him. He's on the quiet side, but wins teammates and fans over with his hustle and high energy. When he finally retires as a player at age 43, he'll actually stick around with the San Francisco Seals as their manager for nearly another decade. He's beloved in this city for all the time he's taken out to teach area kids how to hit and field and work games behind the plate. But this is the moment people outside of San Francisco will know him for. This is the thing that will earn him a listing in the Guinness Book of World Records. Well, sort of at least. They'll spell his last name with an X for some reason. They'll say he plays for Cleveland, where he last played 8 years ago. They'll report that the blimp is hovering at only 800 feet, whereas it's actually 1,200. Regardless, the feat makes its way into the book. Highest catch. First, Joe Sprins heard the terrifying explosion of baseball number 1 destroying itself in nearby bleachers. Then he witnessed the terror of baseball number 2 forming an impact crater at his feet. Here comes baseball number 3. Experts from the University of California will calculate that this ball achieves a maximum speed of about 145 miles per hour, although I can't really figure how they got there. Fangraphs, Baseball Prospectus, and a physicist all concur that the terminal velocity of a baseball is somewhere between 95 and 100 miles per hour. A baseball can, for a time, travel faster than that if it's thrown hard enough, hit hard enough, shot out of a cannon, whatever. But this ball is simply being dropped out the window of the blimp. I fail to see how this thing gets to 145 miles per hour. Maybe they're just desperate to make some kind of sense of what comes next. The pilot drops the ball. It takes Joe just a moment to get a beat on it, but he does, later describing it as an aspirin tablet. It's veering a little behind him, but Joe is a catcher. He has hauled in countless pop flies and countless 95-mile-per-hour fastballs. He is the man to do this. He effortlessly backpedals, eyes up, glove up, ready to make history. Thing is, this is both a pop fly and a 95-mile-per-hour fastball. He has never seen one that was both. Virtually nobody has. I believe that since he's postured with his eyes and arms up, his body is involuntarily falling into its natural pop fly reflexes. Pop flies tend to come down pretty soft. One glove up, right over the face. Ought to do the trick. Always does. The ball lands in his glove. The ball does so with such unholy velocity that it slams itself and the glove directly into Joe's face. He's thrown to the ground as though he's just taken a kick to the head. His teammates' faces say it all. Well, maybe this wasn't such a fun idea after all. Joe, splayed out face down on the Treasure Island topsoil, lifts his head for just long enough to spit out 3 of his teeth. 2 more teeth will eventually fall out on their own as the result of the sheer physical trauma. A bystander appears to be asking Joe whether everything's all right, but he probably can't talk much. His jaw is disintegrated, having been broken in 12 different places. The baseball is sitting motionless on the ground nearby as though it's guilty of nothing at all. Joe did not hang on for the catch. The Guinness Book of World Records is wrong about that too. They just lied and said he caught it. But I suppose that if you're chronicling a fundamentally pointless event, what's the point in getting any of it right? Joe Sprins is helped off the field and sent to the hospital where he will spend the next 3 months. He will make a full recovery. Today's his birthday. Happy birthday, Joe.